All right. We're live for the SitRep for the 5th of March, 2022. Welcome. A lot of stuff going on today. We're up on Instagram and YouTube as well. So depending on what you're watching along on, welcome. I have coffee and I've been up all night drinking whiskey with a friend. So if there's a delay in broadcast, it's not actually your computer freezing. It's just my brain freezing and not knowing what's going on for 5 seconds. Don't worry, it'll reboot. All right, so today with the SitRep this morning, what time do we have? It is 10:06 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time. We're going to talk about floods. We'll talk a bit about Ukraine, talk a little bit about finances. Then hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll get one of my friends, Lauren, that Insta chick, to come on, and we might even do a little bit of commentary on some of the stuff or some, deeper thoughts on what's going on with the floods in Australia at the moment. If you do have any questions, feel free to pop them in. I've got one sort of legacy question up there about money in the bank, so I'll try and get to that a little bit later. Right. So to kick off, I'm going to talk about the New South Wales floods, or the floods that are happening all throughout the eastern seaboard of Australia at the moment. So the eastern side of Australia is getting hammered with rain. For those who haven't seen the news, a lot of flooding going on, starting up in Queensland, up north, and then it sort of made its way further down south, hitting areas around northern New South Wales, the Northern Rivers area, or Byron Bay, most people know it as, Hippie Central. Moving down throughout the north coast up there, hitting Sydney. So Sydney's seen a lot of rain, all the way down to south of Sydney. Southern Highlands have been hammered with a bit of rain. Even down here where I am in southern New South Wales, we've been getting a fair bit of rain, a bit of flooding, a bit of localized flooding. Surprise, surprise, somebody tried to drive through the floods yesterday and got caught in the floodwater. Shocking. Anyone who's watched any of these lives for the last 3 or 4 times have heard me say about this: don't drive through floodwater. And every single time we have a flood, somebody drives through these floodwaters, which obviously then puts a lot of other people at risk. So you've got emergency services who have to be reacted, fire and rescue, police, all these people have to go out there, and individual, just punters out there who maybe have a four-wheel drive or experience recovery, or tractors or things like that are out there pulling people out of these floodwaters. So again, it's not just yourself that you need to think about. If you're going to drive through floodwaters, it's a whole heap of other people. So do consider that. All right. So I've been talking to a few friends up in the Northern Rivers, and for those who don't know the situation up there, a huge amount of flooding has happened. It has cut off people. The emergency services are struggling to react to it, and they're also struggling to get enough people to it. And maybe that has something to do with the fact that they put restrictions on that based on, certain medical procedures. But regardless of that, there's a shortfall there from a government sort of response for the people on the ground. So there are people who are stuck where they are. There are people without communications, without food, without clean water. All that happening in Australia, in a fairly affluent part of Australia too. So they're struggling a bit. I have a number of friends who are up there. I used to live up there myself. Number of friends who live up there now and are severely affected, and I've been trying to get information here and there off them. It's difficult, obviously, making sure that they're safe, making sure that they're resourced enough. But when they can get in communication with me, I've been trying to glean what information, what pertinent information I can get out of them, so I can pass on these sorts of things, and we can help better prepare ourselves if we're looking at getting flooded in, or these sort of events are going to happen to us, or just in the future in general. Because it's my belief that these extreme weather events are not anymore once in a lifetime events. They're not once in 30-year events. These are going to be once in 5-year, once in every 2-year events that we're going to start seeing now. And I'm talking about like catastrophic fires that we had 2 years ago. I think within another 3 years, we'll see another version of that within Australia. I'm talking about these floods. We're going to see many more flood events happen, all these sorts of things. And Australia is known for flooding and fires and all sorts of weird weather events happen here. It's not out of the ordinary, but I think the frequency at which we're going to experience them will start to be out of the ordinary. I think it's increasing. That's my take on it. Feel free to argue that if you want. I'm always down for a good discussion on these things. If you've got some other information that I don't know, I'd love to hear it. Okay, so from one of my friends in particular, I was talking to her about what sort of things she felt she needed and what she was seeing out there in the community that was missing. So what people, maybe could have prepared for. She was actually quite well prepared. There was a couple of things now that she looks back and goes, oh, maybe I could have had this or could have done that. But for the main part, she was very well prepared, very well resourced, had enough food, has water stored up. So is safe, is dry, is warm, is fed and watered. And so that's good. That's, really, really, this is the sort of stuff that I want to hear from people. And this is the reason that I put this information out there, is so people can react to these sort of things in an appropriate manner. And so she foresaw things getting a little bit worse 2 years ago and started preparing then. So way to go. I'm super stoked with her efforts in what's happened there. One thing I want to say too is there's a lot of information that's coming out of the northern rivers at the moment. I'm having a real hard time ascertaining what's real and what's not. Some people in emergency situations, if they're not used to dealing with these, they catastrophize it hugely. So I can't quite tell if this is people who maybe have never been in a natural disaster before and going, this is the end of the world, we're all dying, we need help, there is no government response. There's a propensity to blame government or to blame anyone really when something like this happens. It certainly happened with the fires around me when I was fighting those huge fires in 2019, 2020. And I was doing the same thing. I was like, where is the government right now? Why aren't we getting resource? Why are we getting no response? Why was it average Joes who had to step up and fill the breach here? So it's worthwhile, saying these things, but we also need to back it up and hopefully implement something better. So the good news that's coming out from that side of things up in the Northern Rivers is that the community is apparently pulling together. People are in high spirits up there. And it's really galvanizing the community to work for each other, which is what I want to see. That's perfect. That's my dream goal in life, is to have people working more in a community mindset, smaller governance and governance to the local area. None of this sort of like waiting for Scott Morrison to fly in a helicopter, because that's just not going to happen, or it's too little too late. All right. So here's the sort of things that that I've seen and that I've been told by people on the ground that are missing, or some things that we might want to think about whenever we're preparing grab bags and our own preps for what's going to happen in life in general. Organization, command and control. It's very chaotic from all accounts up there. The community is banding together, but you've got many people doing their own thing and randomly flitting around, and no one really knows what's going on. Nobody knows where somebody else is as well. So that creates dangers within itself. So to give you an example of this, just things like having maps and compasses. I've got heaps of props here today, by the way, so I'll be like showing you stuff. So that's a map in a waterproof case that I can draw on, and a compass that I can actually navigate with. And the handy thing about this is, say, if I'm in a fire zone or in a flood zone, I can day by day, or as information comes in, mark this on the map and then just get some of that hand sanitizer and wipe it off. So I can update this map, and then that's a solid map, and I'm not relying on any piece of technology which can kind of fail at any point and run out of batteries or something as simple as that. So that's as a standard. I think people should be starting to invest in maps, hard copy maps for your local area, so you can get to understand what the terrain is doing and where the threats actually are. So if it's flood, you can actually mark in what streets are flooded, what rivers or causeways or whatever have overblown their banks, and where that water is actually affecting things like roads and people's houses. Um, on top of that, utilizing the technology that we have. So one thing that we did when we were fighting the fires, just as average Joes, in 2019, is we were using certain apps. So the apps that I got people to jump on was Life 360, and it's a tracking app, but we could keep abreast of where everybody was at any stage. So we were independent people just with utes or little trucks. We chucked water tanks and pumps on the back of them. We went out and fought fires. We all had communications, UHF communications, phones, and we were tracking each other as well. So we had a HQ. We'd sort of set up a HQ element that we could coordinate people. So we had command and control there. So that's one thing that appears to be missing a little bit up there, or that I'm getting reports of at least, is that, who is in actual command and control. We need somebody to step up in an emergency situation. It doesn't really matter who it is. It doesn't need to be the mayor or something. It's just whoever's most resourced and whoever can do it should be doing it. So that's something to think about. So start thinking about that when you considering your local area, maybe your mutual assistance groups or whatever. Talk about tracking apps so you can keep an eye on where everyone is in an emergency. You don't have to obviously have it on all the time. You can turn that stuff off if you don't want people knowing where you're going. Okay. Water contamination. So a big thing that comes out of floods is contaminated water. Obviously, sewage plants go underwater and they spread that sewage out into the wider area. People are stuck in this water. They're having to move through this water. They might even be showering and doing such what. I really hope people aren't drinking the water out of the taps or anything like that, because it will be contaminated. I never saw, or I haven't yet seen, an official boil water release from the government side of things. I've heard people talk about it, but I haven't seen. So if somebody has seen that, it should be out there, but I just haven't seen it. So if someone has seen that, feel free to fill me in on that and send me some information about it. But for anyone, if you know people up there and you're in contact with them, tell them, do not drink the water. You need to purify the water. You need to at least boil that water for an amount of time, 5 to 10 minutes before you're drinking it. But other things like water purification devices, like this is a Life straw, or I've got a Grail version of this, so that I can just fill that with water and drink that water pretty safely then. Or purification tablets, so little tablets that you put in there, and they kind of generally it's like a chlorine type tablet that chlorinates the water, but it kills all the nasties in it, which means that you can then drink water. Or storing up water. So my friend I was talking about had heaps of water stored up for just such an emergency. So yeah, be aware of that water is a big deal. In the order of priority of things, water is much more important than food for a human to survive. So make sure you're sorting out that water. Buying of goods, apparently a lot of supermarkets had runs on them. There's not a lot of food in there, and of course the supply chain has been disrupted to get in there, so they're not getting restocked anytime soon. So it's hard to get things, but even things, when you can get things, there's a lot of problems with communications. And so the first part of that I'm going to talk about is ATMs and FPOS, not existent. So electronic forms of money are not there. You cannot access them, or people have been struggling to access them. Cash is needed in these occasions. And so I often talk about this. Make sure you have some amount of cash on hand. And that's how long is a piece of string to how much you want to have. But I recommend having a good little chunk of cash stored away somewhere for an emergency that you can just grab and you can use that. So if the power grid went down or something, but we could still get petrol out and you needed to fill your car, or you needed to buy food, or I don't know, bullets or whatever it was, you're bartering with people, that you had the cash to actually do that. And if there's 150 people around and there's only 2 that have cash on them, you're going to get prioritized. So make sure that you've got that cash. That's a big one. So communications on the whole have been really, really patchy up there. Apparently, for people who aren't Australian listening in here, we've got a number of different services we can use for phones, but it's not like in the US where there's kind of 4 or 5 big companies. We've got 2 major companies that kind of own the system. Telstra and Optus. So Optus has been getting a little bit of spotty communication, and apparently Telstra has been getting none, like almost zero, which Telstra is technically the bigger one. So I mean that's disturbing, but again, like these are not things that you should ever rely on for your life. You should always think like, what if that goes down? Because that's an extrinsic thing that you cannot rely on within yourself. You can't do anything about it if they fail. You can't do anything about it if they decide to shut it off. So thinking about alternate communications, one of the things my friend said to me is like, I wish I had some radios. What can we do about radios? I've had another 2 or 3 people message me on Instagram saying, hey, radios, what do we do? And so like UHF radios, things like this. So this one here is a 5-watt, 80 channel locked UHF radio off the shelf. This brand is Uniden. Another brand you can get is GME. There's a couple other brands. They're probably the 2 big ones in Australia. Easy to use, expensive. A 5-watt one is expensive. Think about what you're going to be using it for. 5 watts going to go further. So if you're in a remote location, which a lot of people are up in the Northern Rivers at the moment, in these sort of more remote locations, then you're going to be able to talk further. But if you need to save money and you don't need to talk further, go for a 2-watt or a 1-watt version. So they're not going to go as far. They're not as powerful. But if you're just talking to family and friends and like within a sort of a K radius, then a 1-watt would do you fine. You don't need to spend a couple $100 to get that one. There are other versions of radios. I'm not really going to go into it today. I might actually try and shoot a video on radio communication, so UHF communications, if I get the time. I've been pretty shit with shooting videos at the moment, so apart from these ones. The other sort of thing that you can think about, let me go through my props here, is satellite communication. So this here is a Garmin InReach. This is the big version. You can also get a mini version, which is about that big and doesn't really have the screen like this one. So this is a GPS unit. I can actually, load up a map on this and navigate with it. But it's also an emergency communicator. So on the side here, you got a little SOS button. So you can flip that open and hit that button, and you'll get you'll send out an emergency signal on the emergency frequency. You can also connect this. So it's a subscription service, but you can connect this and send messages, so SMS, through here to satellite and out to someone. It does cost a little bit. It's not free to do that, but in an emergency, like that could be extremely valuable. So there's people right now who are like in, say, like Main Arm or Wilson's Creek areas up in the Northern Rivers who are kind of like shut off from people. And there's people who don't really know what's going on with them. They can't get messages out. There's no telecommunications. There's no cell network. Whereas if they had something like this, or maybe even Elon Musk's Starlink sort of thing, where you can connect to the internet through satellite, which I, after assessing a few things in the world, I'd kind of been a bit, standoffish with it. But I've actually gone out and purchased one now. So I'm going to be testing that out. I don't know when it's going to get here. It could take a while. But when it does get here, I'm going to test it out pretty thoroughly. I'm going to take it to different locations, and I'll put that information out there as well to give an assessment of what I think it works like in the Australian environment. But yeah, pretty famously, they're going into Ukraine there as well and utilizing that. But yeah, satellite communications, this one here, this is going to cost you a few $100, as in like 3 to 6, depending on what unit you get, plus subscription service. But in an emergency, you're going to be able to get messages out. And if you're stuck somewhere and can't even get an SOS call out, that can be life-threatening. So that piece of equipment there could be something that could save your life. Okay, communications. One thing I want people to start thinking about too is follow-on effects from flood. Everyone concentrates on that water coming down. That's just the first part of it. The after effects of any natural disaster are almost always more impactful than the initial event itself. In that we've got a couple of things that flow out of it. So we've got secondhand effects and we've got human effects. So at the moment, it looks like the human effects are quite good. It looks like the community is coming together, which is brilliant to see. Beautiful, loving people up there, generally speaking. So I would kind of expect that from people up in the Northern Rivers. but they're galvanized, they're coming together, they're helping each other out, and that's great. A lot of the times in these sort of natural disasters is when the worst kind of people come out, and people turn, it's me first, and then maybe someone else, but they turn on each other, and they do quite nefarious things in these situations. The other one is the secondary effects of the natural disaster. So in particular, waterborne diseases and pest. So animals, and in particular mosquitoes, that's something that's going to proliferate around floodwater. That's something you need to concentrate on. You're in a subtropical or tropical area up there, and you've got those kind of diseases that are going to go on. Now, I just saw on the news this morning that they just released that they found a case of Japanese encephalitis, which is a mosquito-borne disease it gets transmitted through mosquitoes in Brisbane. Okay, so that's a pretty big deal. Japanese encephalitis is a relatively rare disease, but it's quite impactful. So that's something that you need to start considering, is pest control, or doing the sort of things that you need to do to protect yourself from these kind of threats. Mosquitoes, wearing long sleeves, making sure that if you're into using the spray all that sort of stuff. Certain colors you can wear, certain clothing you can get that's imbued with, I don't know, some sort of chemical shitstorm that Mozzies don't like. But just be aware of that too. That's going to be a threat. And then you've got threats from waterborne diseases. So, there's a whole heap of waterborne diseases that are going to make you sick, that, could compromise your health in certain ways, and then could compromise other people's health around you. So be aware of that. First aid and hygiene is a huge thing. Hygiene, massive thing. I know, the dirty sanitizer that a lot of conspiracy theorists hate, but that stuff in this sort of situation is extremely valuable. You're touching water, it's contaminated. You're touching contaminated surfaces. It's floating around there all the time. Then you're like, I'm hungry, bang, eat something, and you just pass the pathogen. You're the vector of the pathogen into your own body. So if you can do something, just slap a little bit of that on your hands. And I know there's counterpoints to this, and it's probably going to, somebody will send me a message going hand sanitizer is a conspiracy from the World Health Organization to take over our minds and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I get that. But also triage the giardia that you're going to get, or the barley belly or whatever it is, gastro stuff that you're going to get is going to do more damage to you in the short term than putting a bit of that on your hands. So put a bit of that in your hands, and that there is poo tickets as well. Always have some of that in hand. Otherwise, you've got to go fight bogan people in supermarkets for it. But making sure that you seal this stuff up. So waterproofing is a big thing. Ziploc bags, waterproof Baja bags or Baja bags. These just roll out, and you stuff your stuff in there. They're like little stuff sacks, and then you roll it up and clip it together, and it keeps everything waterproof. So having clothing, spare clothing, waterproofed, making sure you're waterproofing everything gets waterproof that's not already waterproof. Huge thing. And just on that too, clothing and things like that. One thing you might want to consider is that you're going to be moving around a affected area, like the flood areas, mud. Like I said, there's probably diseases and other pathogens in that water. So have a dirty set of clothes and a clean or dry set of clothes, and keep that clean and dry set of clothes sacred. And you put that on at night. So you pull all this stuff off, you clean up, you put that other clean, dry stuff on so you can be comfortable, you can sleep at night, because that's a big part of first aid of health and hygiene. And you can sleep in that sort of stuff. And then when it comes time to go out into the world again, you get your dirty clothes and your dirty, wet clothes back on, and back out you go. So you're not cross-contaminating those two things. Movement as well around the area. So good hardy clothing is necessary, and shoes as well. So good hiking boots, something thick, maybe even consider stuff that have shanks or planks through the sole of them, so that you can't be penetrated by things, because obviously you can't see the ground if you're walking through floodwater. You don't know what's there. It could be star pickets, there could be holes or whatever. So generally I say if you're walking through flood water, have a stick or something that you can poke in front of you so you know you're not going to fall down anything. And wear good solid footwear as well, so good solid boots. You might be having to climb up and hike to areas to help people out. And so like you're going to need that sort of stuff, flip-flops or thongs, little flimsy runners or tennis shoes and stuff like that. They're not really going to do too much for you. Better than nothing, but try and get some boots on. Gloves as well. If you're reaching around, anyone assisting people in and around there, you want good hard working gloves. So something to put on your hands, protect your hands. And there's a million different gloves out there. I'm not really going to go into brands or anything like that, but just something to protect your hands. So think about that as well. Gloves, important. All right. Tools as well. So something like this is a silky saw. So just a saw blade that, that folds out. Cutting tools, pruners, pliers, crowbars and stuff like that, depending on what sort of destruction or what you've got to go through. But these are the sort of things that I'd probably have on my backpack. I'd have, something like that, silky saw, a little tomahawk or axe or something like that. Maybe you can see one up in the background there. Just those sort of tools where I can bang through something, cut through stuff, move refuse or get things out of my way. Nothing too over the top. It depends. Like if I had my vehicle and there was trees down, then I've got my chainsaw on it. But, if I'm walking around, I'm not going to carry a chainsaw on my back. Just not into that. All right, lights and power. So considering like torches, little emergency light. So this is a little solar powered emergency light, and you just blow that up and that turns on. So don't need to you recharge it in the sun. It's nice and easy. Power banks and things like that. A lot of people running out of power in these areas. So that's something you want to consider as well. And then, food and stuff like that. There are people who are running out of food. So consider having like little stores of this is just freeze dried stuff that you can, or dehydrated stuff that I can put boiling water in. I've got a nice hot meal and little emergency food bars filled with calories and vitamins and stuff like that. I've actually done that particular emergency bar I just showed you there, the Mayday bar. I did a review on that on the YouTube channel. So go check out Ragnarok Survival and have a look through and you'll see the Mayday survival bar or something. I can't remember what I called it, but that's on there as well. Also, like little chem lights or Siloom. These are just those little break, and it gives off like a little green glow. That's a good thing in an emergency to have to mark areas. If you're stuck somewhere, cracking that, waving it over your head, or tying a little string to it and whipping it over your head, and it creates like in the dark, it creates this huge green disc around you. So even people in helicopters can see that. We used to use that in the military. That was a tactic we used in the military. Swing that over the head when we're calling in helicopters. So, if you're stuck at night, it's raining, you're on the roof of your house, you've got to call out like, hey, I'm at this address, it's emergency, I'm bad, things are really bad. You can hear choppers around and they're looking around, bang, crack that siren, whip that out, attract attention to you. There's probably a whole heap of other things. Those were the major things that sort of came out with conversations with people on the ground there. There'll be more of that sort of stuff. But the reason I'm putting this out, obviously, is so we can start to prepare ourselves and think about things like grab bags and or emergency trunks or things like that you're going to have on you or in your house. Particularly what I'm thinking about here is I'm starting to gear my mind up towards, will I make the trek up there and drive up there? If things are still bad enough in a day or two, I probably will look at doing that. So what sort of things am I going to take up and how am I going to move around the area? Because I don't want to go up there and just be a body who's up there going like, hey, what am I going to do? I want to get up there. I want to be organized. I want to have all the right safety equipment and gear that I would need to help people out, to hike into places with food or water, with communication, so I can take this in and allow people to communicate through it, with energy. So, if I can drive up with my generator as well and have people power up off that. all these sorts of things I'm thinking about because I don't want to be a burden. Remember, one of my favorite things to say is, be an asset, not a liability. I don't want to go up there. It's not like if they're screaming for help, we shouldn't all just run up there because we could be creating more of a burden in that situation. So if you are also thinking along those lines, this is why I'm sort of putting this information out there. This is the sort of thing that people need at the moment up there. Certainly food, clothing, shelter, all that sort of stuff is extant, water, but all the other little things too. Don't just rock up there in your boardies and go, yeah, I just swim out to them. It'll be fine. It won't be fine. and then you're going to be the one who's, having to be rescued. All right. So that's the sort of flood situation. I'm not going to talk on too much about that. Today I will probably talk about it more tomorrow or the next time I do another SitRep. I'll just switch gears here and go to Ukraine for a bit. There's a bit of information in the last 48 hours that was kind of interesting. Firing that nuclear plant, people need to chill out and actually look at what's going on the ground there. I don't know how many people yesterday asked me, were like, this nuclear plant is on fire. And I'm like, okay, there's no information that I have seen come out that actually says that nuclear plant is on fire. And a lot of the reports said there was shelling, and I couldn't see any specific shelling going on, like heavy weapons or artillery. There was gunfire around there. That's not shelling. So yeah, the end part was, yes, there was some sort of fire that goes in that was happening around that area, around in the nuclear facility, but not in an actual reactor. And those reactors actually have a lot of fail safes in them and firefighting ability, automated firefighting ability within them as well. But by all reports now, that fire wasn't there. There was also no radiation increases at all. So you can actually monitor this. You can look at radiation increases because it's quite disturbing, the increase in radiation around the Chernobyl area. But this particular one, not so much. But as of this morning, apparently the Russians have taken control of that particular nuclear facility, which is the largest in Europe. So it's kind of disturbing. Other things that in this conflict that have piqued my interest this morning is that Russia is apparently building up forces on the western side of Belarus in a town or in a city called Brest, which is right on the border with Poland. And Poland is obviously a NATO member, and Poland also has a lot of US forces in it. So what's going on there? That's, again, I try and get the information that I look at and go like, that could be something bad. Let's keep an eye on this. So this is another, let's keep an eye on that sort of thing. Might be nothing, might be something. And still Russia is moving through. They're still little by little taking over more of the Ukraine, or moving into the Ukraine more and more. And they changed their tactics. For anyone who didn't listen to my talk a couple of days ago, they changed their tactics to more aggressively shelling. So actually using heavy artillery and missile attacks in areas and in cities, in populated areas too, which is not good for the people on the ground. So yeah, feeling for the people over there. They're probably having a bad time of it today. All right, so I'll just talk about finance stuff. Most of the major markets are down at the moment. If I can just check that. Where are we? Most of the markets are down as of this morning, and obviously we're in Saturday now, so all the markets are closed for the weekend, or will be closed soon, but varying amounts, but usually not by too much. The Asia Pacific ones got hit pretty hard. Australia, we were down, but not by much. It was negligible. Nikkei was down. Hang Seng was down 2.5%, which is substantial enough. The CAC, the FTSE, the DAX, this is all European ones like UK, Germany, down 3.5 to 5%. So, a lot of hits being taken there. And even the American markets were down a little bit, not that much. Big movements in commodities. Obviously, we're seeing oil prices go up. We're seeing agricultural prices go up. Energy prices all across the board are still fucking skyrocketing. Like crude oil, Brent crude has gone up almost 7%. That's now at 118 US dollars a barrel. That's a huge amount. And if you haven't seen this affect your Bowser price yet, then you're very lucky, because it definitely has affected mine. This morning I walked past the station, the petrol station, local petrol station, and diesel is at $1.90 here. So that's pretty high. Premium premium petrol is at $2.10 a liter. So that's a lot, obviously. Large increases. Gas, oil, heating oil, natural gas, all increased, all going up. Metals markets, gold spot price is creeping like eerily towards that magical $2,000 US an ounce mark, which is kind of like, anyone who's been in the gold or had their mind in the gold situation for a while, you're like 2,000 is like that's an upper limit. If it hits that and busts through that, then it's that's pretty scary day, I reckon. Silver's still still over $25, which is relatively high for that as well. Cool. So that's the major markets at the moment. What we're seeing here is a bit of fallout from sanctions. I'll go on a little bit of a rant about sanctions now. So the sanctions that have been put on place, like really, really broad sanctions, and a lot of not necessarily sanctions, but blocking of certain individuals and organizations and groups, which I don't think is the right thing to do. In that, I think sanctions are the right thing to do. And I think, people should be sanctioning Russia and should be sanctioning Russian government organizations and the oligarchs, and specifically the people who voted for, the invasion. But, we're seeing things like Russian tennis players banned from playing, Russian sporting organizations like soccer teams banned or taken out of leagues. We're seeing Paralympians, so, disabled athletes banned from competing. And I wonder how much a Paralympian, a disabled athlete, had to do with the invasion of Ukraine. I'm like, that's a pretty far stretch from, hurting the people who went into war to like getting to that point. In my mind, at least, that's a pretty far stretch. I'm not pro-Putin, by the way. I hate that caveat. I think it should be so obvious, but it needs to be said to some people. So we're seeing these sorts of bans and things like that happening, and it doesn't appear to be making a lot of sense in my head why you'd be doing that, and especially when you're considering that the US is still buying like something like $230 billion of Russian oil, which they're starting to talk about. We might stop doing that. We might stop doing that as soon as we can sign a deal with Iran to get their oil. Then we'll stop doing that with Russia. So I think the whole thing is a bit of a farce, really. It's like just a moot point. Why would you slap sanctions, and especially like on these weird things like, this news organization or this movie company or, this restaurant or this athlete, and then like have $230 billion pumping into their economy because you don't want to hurt Americans at the Bowser of fuel price anymore. Well, maybe you should have a look at the electricity price or the gas price for your average German citizen right now, because they're taking the hit. They're taking it big time, and there's nothing they can do about it. Is this one in, all in, or is it rules for thee and rules for me? I wonder. But hopefully they can, sort of turn that off. Again, China's still going to be a lifeline for Russia. So what will these sanctions do? I don't know. Yeah, that's probably all the major stuff that I've got for today. So I'm going to probably wrap it up there. Just check no questions come in. Oh, there was one question. Wise ideas for savings to be left in bank accounts or cash or invest. So I've talked to a few people about this, and I was actually over breakfast was having a chat with a friend about this as well. Your money in the bank at the moment, if that's all your savings, you've got everything in that one basket, then like that's pretty risky type of option. I think, again, I'm not a financial advisor, but I find that a pretty risky prospect to have all your eggs in one basket. Also, considering that that money that you're going to leave in the bank is being affected by inflation right now. So that money will be worth less tomorrow and next week and next month. That's going to continue to happen. Food prices are going to increase. So if you could have some sort of long-term storage of food, if you could take some of that money and buy food, then you're not only like that chunk of money is not only not affected by inflation anymore, but that food that you have bought, which will increase in price over time, is now being bought and secured at a lower rate, at a lower cost. So when you eat it 2 months time, you are making money and saving money by eating that food. It sounds a bit weird, and maybe I'm not explaining it the right way, but that's how it works in my head. So, consider buying more food. Consider, investing in things like land or property or preps and things like that. Even consider investing in gold and silver. Like I said, it is up, but historically, it always goes up. So historically, it is a store of wealth. And I said the word invest there. I shouldn't. I don't like to use the I word when I'm talking about precious metals. I rather the word savings. So put your money, instead of in cash, into a savings account of gold and silver. So you buy gold and silver and you hold on to that, because the long-term value of gold and silver holds, historically speaking. The long-term value of cash does not hold, historically speaking. So that's my thoughts on that. If you've got all your money in the bank, I think that's risky. Up to you what you do. I'm not doing that. I do have some in the bank though. I'm not taking it all out and buying 20 years worth of food and storing it in a bunker somewhere. I'm taking some of it out and buying some food and storing it in some of a bunker, if that makes sense. There's a part that's going to that, but there's parts where I'm thinking, okay, well, what can I invest in that's going to help me if things go wrong, but also if things go right as well. If this all blows over tomorrow and everything kicks on and the wheels of the economy keep magically increasing to infinity, have I put my money somewhere where that's going to work out okay for me? And that's why I think about precious metals. I think they'll still be, they'll still have a value no matter what happens. And food as well still have a value no matter what happens, because I still got to eat at the end of the day. All right. Hey, that Insta-check. Awesome. Well, I'm going to bring in Lauren now. So that's the end of the my rant. I'm going to bring in Lauren. I'm not sure how long I have left on this live, but if it cuts out, I'll just restart the live and we'll go again. But time now for some social commentary. Sorry about you YouTubers. Actually, I'll cut it there for YouTube because you're not going to be able to see this. And if you want to see this, you can go to Instagram. Peace out. Encephalitis. Hi. I can hear my echo on your.
Sorry, it's when I sit it on my computer.